Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Modern Witches YouTube channel podcast. I am super excited to be here with Jess, the Death Empath, today and kind of diving into the magic of the season, diving into, your personal magic and just kind of getting into it. And I'd love it if you could introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jessica Reis. I'm the Death Empath. I am a ancestral death doula and self-actualization coach, but I'm also a practicing Bruja and on my way to become an actual Mexican shaman. So I'm currently in school for that. Very exciting.
Amazing. It is very exciting.
Yeah.
I love how your work is sort of like straddling those like transformational moments, birth, death.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. If I could get a tattoo, I would definitely be the snake. And I wanted to, but I'm immunologically compromised, and I guess there's like mold and ink sometimes, and that's what I have is mold sickness. So I was so bummed when I found out. But every once in a while, I'll put like a temporary tattoo and be like,
Yeah.
I wish.
Yeah. The temp tattoos have gotten pretty good these days.
They've gotten really good.
Yeah.
I'm like super surprised. I definitely caused at least a minor heart attack for my dad, but
Yeah. That's always kind of interesting.
Yeah, but I think it's hilarious because, I'm pretty much 40 and my dad is still like, I'm like, Dad, I'm like a full grown human being. Like I am midlife right now.
And you're worried about my choices
Yeah,
around
he's
this.
worried
Yeah.
about what I look like. It's more like a representation, right? Of like how you look like to others. Like your daughter
Yeah,
has a tattoo. Oh my God.
totally.
And I'm
I
like,
was
that's still
there.
a thing.
Yeah. My dad was definitely like that for sure.
Did you get your
Had to get it.
tattoos early?
I did get my tattoos early. Yeah. I ripped the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'd love to hear about how you kind of started down your spiritual path. Like what was it that led you to learning all these amazing traditions and practices?
You know what? It's funny. I recently did a post on IG about all dogs go to heaven, right? And I
Yes.
recently put those two together, like the connection of like, oh, I was really fascinated by that whole process of like end of life and dying and the afterlife. But I was always just like a really weird kid in general. Like I loved kind of deeper, darker things. I was raised kind of like on a horse ranch in the middle of like a desert, and there's things that would just die around you all the time. And my family never shielded me from it. They were more like, this is life and death, and this is what it looks like. And cycle of life, this coyote ate this, rodent, and then that coyote passed away naturally or whatever it might be. And I just remember just wanting to hold it and like really kind of investigate the
Mhm.
deconstruction of these like vessels. And I can vividly remember doing that with all sorts of different things, from like insects to animals. I'm like, oh, and anatomy, and this is how it works. But I was also really fascinated on like they weren't alive anymore. The lack of animation was gone, and I had a lot of curiosity with that. And then I experienced, unfortunately, child sexual abuse, and that natural curiosity towards kind of more like macabre, darker things, as people call it, really was amplified with suicide and death ideation. And I romanticized death for a long time. And, uh, this is years later. I'm like in my 30s. I have like a business, and my husband's grandmother passes away, and she passes away by herself. And mind you, at this point, I'm like managing my depression and like my chronic depression and my suicide and death ideation with like being a workaholic. Like if I don't have time to think and I'm doing all this for others, then I'll be fine and safe. And culturally speaking, it's really rare for a family member to be in the hospital by themselves. Like even if it's just like you're in the hospital for like a broken arm or something, like we will show up. It's like culturally a thing. And when I found out my husband's grandmother passed away, I was kind of in shock. I was, we got a phone call saying, she's passing actually. And I got all my things together. We were 45 minutes away. I collected all my belongings, and I was waiting by the door. And it was like really strange. Like 10 minutes passed, 15 minutes passed, and no one was coming down. Eventually, I like went over and I'm like, hey, hon, when are we leaving? And he's like, I talked to my folks and they're they said their goodbyes already. And I was like, yeah, like what? It didn't compute. And I know now in my practice, because I've been a death doula, I've done my training like 6, 7 years ago, and I've been doing this work for over 2 years now, like full time. I know now it was her choice actually to
Mm.
pass away by herself, his grandmother's choice. And people do that, especially in our culture. And I can like definitely get into that. The Western
Yeah.
culture is more of the, we just really don't know how to kind of like deal with death and grieve. And so we just assume also that our children don't know how to deal with it. And a lot of parents decide like, I don't want them to see this part of me. I don't want them to see them. I don't want them to see me like this in my death,
Right.
my last moments here on earth. And so they do, they'll like shield their children till the end and will like wait for them to walk out, use the bathroom or something, or go grab a drink of water, go back home and take a shower. And they're like, okay, this is my time, and they'll pass.
Yeah.
So that was really the shift into my current work, into looking into what a kind of death doula is. At first, I was looking to be a volunteer to just sit with people.
Hmm.
And then this term end of life doula came up, or death midwife, death companion, and I was like, everything lined up. I was like, oh my god, this is it. My whole life, like why I'm
Mm.
kind of dark and different, and like love stuff about death and dying. And I went full like fledged into it and totally loved it. Each part of my training with death work, becoming a death doula, was such a healing component to my life and my journey as like someone who had experienced what I experienced. And it was a lot of shadow work, and
Mm.
it was deep and painful and so beautiful at the same time. And I finally found other like-minded individuals that I could like have these conversations about death and dying and end of life. And then pandemic hit, and I was an event producer before, and then we weren't doing events before. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
we can have 10 people at a time. And I was like, that's my work, my business is done.
Yeah.
And I took that as an opportunity. I had actually been really sick. I was exposed to mold, so I got mold sickness while I was in my business.
Mm.
And I got really burned out. I had been a caretaker also for 10 years. My husband had Lyme disease, chronic Lyme disease. And so I felt like I was constantly around this kind of end of life, even if it's just energetically or like ego death or real death. I was like that bridge or that caretaker in those moments, those really heavy, um, deep, sorrowful moments. And yeah, I was like, all right, perfect opportunity. I'm gonna go ahead and try to figure this death doula stuff out. And it became this amazing work of, it felt like a spider web, because we all had to go virtual, right? We were no longer allowed to go into hospice care, and we weren't allowed into facilities. And so a lot of us had to transform our work to virtual spaces. And that,
Yeah.
doing the Witches Confluence all online. And
Hmm.
that opened up different countries. I was working with people in Spain and
Wow.
Australia, and people from the UK would,
Mm.
ask for my services. And then I would do these like larger community groups, and it's people from all over the world, and
Mm.
holding each other, being seen, and learning how to witness like grief and death and end of life. And it was incredible. So yeah, in a nutshell.
Yeah. And what a potent time for all of that to kind of um that opportunity to present itself to you during a pandemic when, yeah, there was a lot of death
A
happening.
lot of death, a lot of grief, but not just real physical death, like
Mm.
living deaths, energetic deaths, ego
Yeah.
deaths. We were all thrown into this kind of tornado of everything being ripped apart, everything that we really understood, our stability, our livelihoods, our jobs. And another thing is, after I did my training, like literally 3 months afterwards, my grandmother became to go into actually passing.
Oh, wow.
And I was the one who death sat with her. And
Mm.
she took her last breath in my arms. And it was
Mm.
the craziest moment, because, and then a lot of death workers can say this, for people who've held their loved ones in end of life, you do kind of feel like this angel of death. but you don't understand how important it is. Because they did give her last syringe of morphine, and I held her and I told her it was okay to go. Like, we were okay. We're going to be fine without her. We're going to miss her, but it's time for her to go. And it wasn't until 2 weeks later that I really processed, like, oh no, she chose me. Like, she made sure that I got that training and chose me out of like 80 cousins, because I have a big family,
Yeah.
to be the one to sit with her and hold her. And I felt this sacredness also to the
Mm.
work, and this this kind of ancestral baton being passed down. Like, it was literally like DNA lighting up, being reconfigured with like this like cosmic purpose. And I was like, oh, okay, this is
Yes,
amazing. Yeah. So
that's so special.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about kind of your lineage, your culture, and how that's informed your work and your experience of death and your
Sure.
practices, if you don't mind sharing.
No, not at all. So I am Mexican American. I'm first gen. And I've been really working on kind of trying to reestablish those ancestral lines. So on my dad's side, we have Yaqui. So we are Yaqui natives. And my grandmother is also indigenous, but we don't know where or what she's from, because, a lot of the purging of the indigenous bloodline has been happening for a long time, especially in Mexico. However, Mexico does have one of the largest like indigenous populations in the world. I think
Mhm.
there's like 25 million native or indigenous people still there, like speaking their languages. And it's always like, hey, we are still here. They say that all the time.
Yeah.
We are definitely still here. Our practices are still somewhat intact. And so it's been trying to remove all those obstacles of intergenerational trauma, and also like uh, inter-racism, like there's a huge like aspect of colorism in, I mean I could talk in my own family too, not immediate family, but like how we were raised. And so just trying to pull all that aside to really see what's really there, calling in ancestors spiritually, getting guidance. My grandmother was a I she didn't call herself a curandera, but I mean, her practices were definitely healer work. She was always making some sort of concoction or tea when you were sick, or slapping on some leaves to your forehead or your body. So she definitely had the abilities. And on my dad's side, once I started doing more of like um, ancestral and past life work, there's definitely more of the bruja side, more of the quantum kind of healing and
Mm.
medicine, and more of like environmental magic. So it's been, going into kind of, or seeing practitioners with an open mind, and, allowing just all the past life, energetic, ancestral stuff to just come forward and do its thing. And I just accept it versus questioning, well, what is this really? And then it's guided me to actually look into like the history of things. And so I have like this beautiful collection of like Yaqui myths and folklore. And I'm planning a trip. There's a museum down there in Sonora that I'm really excited to go see. And I
Cool.
want to pick up some traditional outfits. We have things like death stories and folklore around animal spirits. So that's really guided my work. But in general, Mexican culture, at least what I've been familiar with, is that, and my brother said this to me once, he's like, we're kind of like a fatalist culture, but not in a negative way. We're just kind of like, we know our time is limited. And so we like work really hard, and then we like get together and party hard too. And we do things like, we do have the Day of the Dead ceremonies, and our ancestral, like our ancient connection, we had a lot of death personifications, which would seem like deities or like gods, but they were death energies. And you had different types of death energies, that were specific to whatever culture or tribe you were from. And then even with Catholicism in place, we have things like novenas, where we set out for like 9 days, and we have candles and we hold this like vigil for our loved ones. We don't typically shield children from the death and dying process. You'll see children as, as a part of ceremony or actively passing, will be present in like a room. They're able to touch the bodies. And again, this is my viewpoint, right, with my own family and our practices. But in general, when I talk to other first gen or people who are from Mexico, that's kind of pretty common. And we also do express ourselves. And if we're doing like, if we're at a funeral, we'll have musicians playing, like a mariachi or a small band playing at the site. And people are crying and singing along and holding each other and screaming and throwing themselves on coffins and or caskets, excuse me. And so it's just kind of like it feels like I grew up in it. Like my grandfather passed away when I was 7, and I remember very much being a part of his whole ceremony and end of life, visiting him when he was in the hospital, crying or singing along. And I remember us having the novena, and I remember it just being this like really incredible thing to be a part of. The room's dark and there's candle light everywhere, and people are praying and holding each other and taking turns. And then I also had a really young cousin pass away when they were 9 and I was 12. So same situation. We weren't shielded. We were made sure we were a part of everyone's grief. And I think that's where I first started learning that grief should be held and seen and witnessed in a community. Not all the time. Like obviously you should have your moments where you can isolate yourself or you don't want to be around people. But those were my first indoctrination into grief. Really is something that's incredibly sacred and very human, along with death. So yeah, that's kind of how that all started.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. That's really
Yeah.
beautiful.
And now
I think, yeah.
oh,
go ahead.
yeah, no. And I'm just saying that now I'm just like following that path into, the shamanism, the becoming like a curandera and a don, and getting back to those. I feel to my roots. Although we're mixed. A lot of us are very mixed with European blood, but I feel more called to my more indigenous side.
I have so many questions.
Yeah,
I'm like, where do I go? I guess there's a question that I would love to ask you and get some clarity around. Can you speak into the difference between a curandera and a bruja?
Yeah, of course. So I'll start. So brujeria is going to be as close to kind of like a witch as you can get, like a brujeria, witchcraft. However, we work with a lot of saints. In my practice, the way I was taught is that we do a lot of, it's almost like this old practice with the new, like Catholic rites and rituals and prayers. Like we do call on the saints and like Virgin Mary and Saint Joseph. Like we're constantly working with saints and candle magic. Excuse me, with candle magic, and we do limpias still, like with eggs. Also do like limpias or like with rosemary, like herb cleanses. So there's a lot of crossover. When I've been doing curandera work and brujeria, I'm like, okay, wherein lies the difference? Excuse me, wherein lies the difference? So when you're doing brujeria, you actually can access darker magic. And a lot of people, that's what they kind of see as a difference, is that, well, brujeria is you're working with the dark arts, right? But I also am like, well, is that propaganda?
Right. Yeah.
Is that witch propaganda? Are you just trying to demonize the craft or the practitioner? And is there a reason why it was differentiated? And so I've been doing a lot of research around the differences. And I think that's really the biggest aspect, is that brujas or brujeria, you can tap into the darker elements. But like with anything, there's always a cost. Like if you're going to hex someone, it's going to come back and there's a price you're going to have to there's a fee pretty much to it. So brujeria, you can do a lot of like love potions. You can do love magic with candles. You can do hexes, things of that nature. So you have what I like to call kind of the aspects of being human, the good and the bad. As a as a witch, as a practicing witch, you know that there's this human aspects of light and dark and in between, the shadow. Neither is good, neither is bad. It's just how you decide to implement your craft. But we know there's always a price if you do decide to go into the darker elements of things, or force someone against their will, or things of that
Mhm.
nature. Even if you're putting someone into a jar, for instance, there's still a price to that.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of what I've noticed are the biggest differences. Where curanderismo is really based on just being the healer. And there's so many different types of curanderas. I mean, you can be someone who's called a sobadora, which you just like do hands-on healing work, almost like a massage therapy, but it's not massage therapy. You're like literally working through energetics in the body. So if I were to kind of really distinguish the two, you can think of curanderismo more of like quantum level healing, working
Mhm.
with multiple dimensions. You're working with like the spirits of not just people, but you're working with the spirits of like animals and elements. And you can either be like a plant healer, an energy healer. You can be a hands on the body healer. There's something in curanderismo called la plática, which is like you heal through speaking with someone,
Mm.
or they heal through speaking. There's so many different types. And it's called mastering your don, which is like finding your, like what your niche is kind of, or like
Mm.
what your purpose is. So the curanderismo is more like really healer driven. And there's not a lot of like hexing happening. It's more about
Mhm.
pulling things from the body and trying to bring it back into balance, and helping people like self-actualize. So there's
Mhm.
more of this holistic. I would see one as like a naturopath, right? Like your curanderismo is more like naturopath, holistic, trying to help you with your own auric field and your energy, where witchcraft or brujeria is very specific to like enchantments and using elements to amplify certain situations, but also can cause harm,
Right.
So that's at least my take on it as
Yeah.
I'm
No, I appreciate that.
diving deeper into everything. Um, and I don't think brujeria is bad at all. I think it just has a really
Mhm.
bad name. I think people just
Yeah.
really, because to this day, if my own mom, who's like not denominational agnostic, does not believe, is not religious. If I tell her I'm doing, say, like stovetop potpourri for protection, she's like, brujeria, brujeria,
Yeah.
she starts saying that, um, now what are you doing with your witchcraft? And I was like, Mom, it's not bad. I'm just trying to cleanse our space,
Mhm.
It's
Totally.
okay. It's okay. It's literally a stovetop potpourri if it makes you feel any better. You don't have to see it as like me actually casting or creating a ritual to help energetically cleanse the house or call in, you know, um, magic.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think thank you for that kind of really rich answer, because I think my the way that I've interacted with brujeria and like the way people have described it to me, I've kind of run the gamut between, this is witchcraft, and like there is different ways to do witchcrafts. You can practice on that spectrum of light and dark and all that's available to you. And then there is that more sort of that lens that people still have towards the word witch as well, which is like, this is no good, this is dark arts, this is um, evil, from like a more Christian or like
Yeah, yeah,
perspective,
yeah.
I
And
guess.
I don't know if you get taken back by the fact that people still are like against anybody practicing their belief system,
Yeah,
because
totally.
that's really all it is. It's our belief,
Exactly.
it's a belief system, and this is what we're practicing. Because I'm actually an animist, right? So I'm a modern animist. That's my foundation. If someone was going to ask me what's your religion, I'd be like, well, I'm an animist. I believe that everything is sentient. And people are like, that rock, I'm like, absolutely, that rock that has the
Mhm.
mineral composition that's like, vibrating in a different way. It's not walking around and talking like what we think um, sentience is, but to me, yes, that rock has very much an essence to it. Um, so yeah, I think it's interesting how like we're at this time in our lives where people are still looking at us like we're this huge threat. And I'm like,
Right.
what do you think that we're not like mutants? We don't have superpowers where we can just go and like kill a bunch of people. And I think people still have that in their mind. Like we're doing the devil's
Yeah,
work. And
totally.
you're like, wow, if you only knew. Like most of my time is me just making like concoctions for, you know, digestive support.
Yeah.
Or, you know, calling in good energy and healing for people.
Right. And I think it's, if you only knew that your Catholic prayers are also akin to like setting intentions with the moon. And
That's what brujeria is. We're always
yeah.
doing Catholic prayers. We're doing the rosary.
Hmm.
Like I said, we work with saints. So we'll light candles to the Virgin Mary. Or
Right.
like I said, Saint Joseph or Peter and be like, hey, help us on our journey, keep us safe.
Mhm.
And it's even, and this is the most interesting part, people who are like devout Catholics will still go and get limpias done. And you're just like, but they'll do it, in the shadows. They'll do it hidden,
Mm,
and that it's very much a part of that folklore, right? But we we only got colonized like what 600 years ago, and in the beginning, people were still trying to practice to their faith, and so they would hide it in their religious, practices, and then that's when you started getting the like what you would have like pagan holidays being, you know, religious holidays being put on top of pagan
right.
holidays. We had the same thing happen in
Hmm.
Mexico. So people were like, oh, we'll just put All Souls Day on top of what they celebrate as Day of the Dead. And it's just that's what we're gonna do now. And you're just
Yep.
going like, well, technically I'm still practicing my old faith, but now it just has been rebranded, you know?
Yes.
And that's really what it is. It's like rebranding, and oh, I like that part of yours. I'm just going to add it to mine. Is that cool? We have deities too, or like energies, but your saints are cool. So I'm just going to put those in there instead, since I can practice with your saints. And I just will let them embody uh, what used to be my energy deity for, you know, health and fertility.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about kind of the long history of magic, which is so entwined with being human beings,
Yeah.
and just acknowledging that, yeah, there is power to access inside of ourselves, outside of ourselves, and like we're able to kind of co-create with this
Mhm.
universe. um and how religion has evolved with that. Even though
Yes.
it's tried to demonize it, there's so much magic in religion, and they try to hide it, I feel like. But
Yeah, and then it has the patriarchal aspects to it too, right? Because
right.
and I had this, I think it was some comedian recently where they're talking about how a woman said that she's having a conversation with God, she'd be burned at the stake. You know why that there's
Hmm.
no women prophets?
Right.
Like it takes like a man's ego to really be like, God's talking to me. And then other men are like, yeah, of course he is. Why wouldn't he be talking to you? You know? But if like a woman had come up and said, God's talking to me, they'd be like, witch, and burn her at the stake. And you're just like,
Yep.
what? Not what? And I love that you talk about power too, because I feel sometimes that our human experience right now, like we're going into what's called quantum conscious state, right? Where we're understanding like emotional intelligence is actually very human
Mm.
and helps us become a little more balanced and self-actualized. Where we had relied so heavily on mind over matter and our physicalness and our the how strong our mental state was or is capable of. And you mentioned power, and I'm like, look at what the human body alone is capable of. And you don't think that you going into the zone and like fine tuning your mechanism is any different than like fine tuning your spiritual mechanism, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And understanding that that everything kind of has its own energy and you can pull from it and use it and alchemize, transmute. But I think
Totally.
we're getting there, that people are really more starting to understand that there's much more to the connection energetically with each other and things around us than just the physical, just matter situation, right?
Yes, I really hope so. I think like the Western paradigm has got to be dismantled in so many ways.
Yeah. I think, yeah, right. Just to have the ability to be open to all different aspects of reality.
Yeah.
We all look at life differently, and a lot of us for a long time didn't question how we were being raised or the traditions that we were, having to follow. And now I think we're starting to really question um, what I call our inheritance.
Mhm.
Like, wait, what is that? Like unpacking and going, wait, whose is this? Like, where is
Right.
this? Why am I hyper vigilant? I have not had this kind of trauma, but yet I inherited this because it was modeled behavior, you know?
Exactly.
Or why do I
Yeah.
dislike this person and why is it so fear based? And is it from a time before when there was reason to fear certain people? Um, because of maybe war or like
Hmm.
injustices, but
Right.
now why am I still carrying this fear of others in
Hmm.
this way, and I do that with my when I'm working with people. I'm because I work a lot with self-actualization, and doing that is really looking at everything that was modeled to you and going, does this really fit the person that you are? Does this really resemble like the person you want to be in the future? Or if you do have children, do you want them to emulate that? Do you want them to
Hmm.
mimic this behavior as well? So
So
yeah,
important.
yeah, I think
And I
so.
do think you're right. We're at this time when that kind of inquiry and self investigation is really promoted, and I have faith that a lot of people are doing a lot of work to kind of clear trauma from their lineage, and
Yeah. And
I'm hoping.
that's where
Yeah.
death work is really like powerful.
Mm,
Because if you sit with death every day, you realize like your mortality is that reminder, like you're not going to live forever. So it lets you know like what's makes you think like what's really important right now. Why am I getting so caught up in these things that in the long run no one will remember? People will barely remember me. They won't remember the things I did or didn't do, or that one time I wore that one thing and everyone laughed at me. The things that we really tend to fixate or focus on. And the truth of it is that most people, they won't remember you. Like, do you know your great grandparents? And that's not that long ago.
right.
Like, I don't even know what my great grandparents looked like or what they did, or I mean, I do because I've investigated historically, but not in a personal way. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of don't realize. Like, do the thing. If it makes you happy and you're not causing harm to others, and you know, just go do it for yourself, because you living is meant to be lived for you, your self-actualization. And in doing so, you being a happy person walking around the world or more balanced, then your interactions with others also will be more balanced, and you'll create this ripple of influence where you'll be that person that people are like, oh my God, they walk in the room and they just like light it up and make you feel good.
Right.
And that's contagious.
It
So
absolutely is.
yeah, just something to
Yeah.
think about.
Very important thing to think about for
Mhm.
sure. Especially as we move into this time of year in the Northern Hemisphere where we're kind of going inward, we're confronted with sort of Earth's natural death and decay cycle, and
Mhm.
um, being called to do that ancestral processing more.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
stillness, I call it the sleep season. Um,
Mhm.
I was on this like trip out to Joshua Tree, and a friend's husband was like, oh my God, everything's just dead. And I'm from the desert, and I'm in California. So I just like kind of looked at him and I was a little offended. I was like, wait a minute, dead. Everything's just asleep. I go,
Yeah.
it's just hibernating. And that's the beautiful thing about the desert, is that it does look barren and just like it does look like everything's dead. But then it was such a beautiful happenstance. It started to rain
Oh,
later that
nice.
day. And then once the water hit everything, the whole landscape changed. Like everything became like these deep greens and these beautiful browns and these reds. And he's just like, oh my God, this place is beautiful. And I'm like, that's life. That that is life right there, where we have to be a little more aware of the seasons and the cycles of things because they're there for a reason. Just like our environment needs a breather and needs to just rest and sleep, right? The death
Hmm.
cycle, so do people. And that's what I love about this season. And I mentioned this to you earlier. I'm a total crone. Like my energy's all crone. I'm like also a Taurus. I'm Taurus sun, I'm an Aquarius moon. I think you're an Aquarius moon too, right?
Yep.
And I'm a Sag
Love it.
rising. Yeah. So I'm always like, I'm always gonna take the opportunity to like, oh, we're resting, let's do it. Oh, we're taking a nap? All right. you
I'm
know,
game.
so game.
I love
Yeah.
it.
But this season, my magic is more amplified
Hmm.
also during this time because I just feel more invigorated. I feel more awake.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing to kind of know your energetic attunement in that way. Like you said, you're more of a crone person.
Mhm.
Because then it makes your own experience of those cycles so much richer.
Oh, I look forward to it. And
Hmm.
although the summer was pretty cool, I actually made it a point to focus on like there's a beach right there. You should probably go visit it.
Yes.
I actually made it a point to go and like earth in the sand and be with this magical being that is our ocean.
Mm,
And so the summer was a lot more exciting for me this time around because I'm typically not a summer bathing suit sand individual. And I was like, oh, this is really nice. So when's fall happening? you know,
totally.
I was like, so when do I get to see? I love the beach in the winter. Like it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
pure magic to me. I'm like, oh, and it's quiet and it's powerful. Where the
Hmm.
rest of the world's like, well, where we are, it's sleeping and hibernated. The ocean's like bigger and louder, and she's just like frolicking around in her bigness. I'm like, this is amazing. This is what we missed during the summer.
Yeah.
Like she's having her own cycle of regeneration. Um,
Absolutely.
and that's why I just look forward to it. I'm like, oh, and coats and hats and boots
I
and
know.
coziness.
Sweaters. Yes.
Tea. For me,
Tea.
it's always fall's always tea season. I bring out the creamy Earl Grey
Hmm.
and I start making stovetop potpourris.
Yes. It's
It's
so
just,
good.
yeah, it's so good. Oh,
Mm. I would love to ask you, I know we've been kind of talking about this whole conversation, but how would you define magic?
hmm. Magic for me is, or so far has been this like seasonal cyclical thing,
Mhm.
meaning each layer of healing or each layer of reconnecting brings this new nuanced magic with it. So this year my focus was on, well, I didn't even know this was my focus, but was reconnecting with family and myself. Having gone through so much burnout and being sick for so long, and then also the pandemic, man, like it
Yeah.
did a number on all of us, especially those of us that are holding spaces for other
Mhm.
people. I think we all needed a break. And the magic for me has been in my reconnection to like nature, like I said, visiting the
Mhm.
ocean, uh, reconnecting with family and that magic of our bond, reestablishing it, um, blowing on the ember, that fire. And magic for me always feels almost like soul energy.
Mhm.
For me, there's this like quietness to it, and it feels like these little sparks and glitter. And whenever I'm feel safe, like when I'm around children, for instance, or animals, I feel very magical. I feel very in my element. I'm the least worried human version of myself. I'm just like that very magical human essence that belongs on this earth plane. Um, and that's how magic feels for me. And so, with this cycle of reconnecting family, friends, self, reconnecting to my home, uh, it feels Taurian. It feels very Taurus, the magic this
Mhm.
season. It's very cozy and comfortable and easy. And I fought it. I'm not gonna lie. I did fight
Yeah.
it at first. The first like 3 months, I was like, what is this? I gotta be doing stuff. I can't believe I'm not doing all the things. Um,
That resonates.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Uh, and also because I think my Aquarius moon, I'm non-committal, right? So I'm more of a like, I once I'm so Taurus gets me really stable and I hate shifting. So
Mhm.
I was in my mode, right? We were all in our mode during the pandemic, doing our thing. And I did not want to shift out of the go into real rest and recovery. And that's where my Aquarius moon kicks in and then is like, fine, okay, we'll try this for a month. And then my Taurus is like, well, this is kind of nice. Maybe we should do this. And my Aquarius is like, no, what are you talking about? We gotta do other things.
Change it up.
Yeah, gotta change it up. You gotta do the podcast and you gotta be on YouTube and you do all these things. And my Taurus was like, well, this is kind of nice. And my Sag is like, can you guys figure this out, please? Because I want to map our
Yeah.
plan of action for the next 5 years. Um, so finally, after the third month, the Aquarius was like, well, I guess we can do a bunch of different things while we're in this healing, reconnecting phase. And I think
Mhm.
once I was able to start, doing different things throughout the day, focusing on different aspects of my life, the Aquarius moon was a little more chill. Like,
Yeah.
okay, all right. But it just took me like 4 months of
Yeah.
like battling back and forth. That it was now being in October, pretty much from October. I'm like, it was so needed. I needed to be there for my sister-in-law. So my sister-in-law had brain surgery or had
Oh,
to undergo brain surgery and they had a newborn. My brother and her
wow.
had their new baby and the baby was having some complications too, like some colics, and digestive stuff, which is really common. But here she is having these like motor skill issues, like cognitive function issues, and we weren't sure what it was. And yeah, she ended up having a tumor and had to get
Wow.
that removed, and the lead up to it, and the surgery, and the recovery from it. So I was able to actually be there because I wasn't in full blown work mode,
Right.
and I was like, oh, this is beautiful because as a practicing shaman or as a trainee, you're meant to work with life and death, right? The whole spectrum. So from birth to death. And that was my kind of like stepping into caretaking for a baby, which
Mm.
I'm not a parent yet. So, and I've been a nanny before and I've taken care of people's children. I really enjoy it, but this is like a new baby. This is like,
Mhm.
and I was pretty much left to take care of her for a good chunk of time, kind of just on my own, as my
Yeah.
brother and his wife are trying to figure everything out. And then my mom gets her cancer diagnosis, and
Wow.
then I went into caretaking mode for that. And I will say this: it is an interesting thing to be with people who have cancer. Right, in my work, I sit with people who are actively passing of cancer, especially people who are younger, but it's really different when it's closer to home. And I think that
Mhm.
goes with anything, right? With most experiences when it comes to like death and dying. And like even although my mom's cancer, they're like, hey, we found it pretty early on. We're pretty sure she's all right. We just have to surgically remove it and she should be okay without chemo. I think I finally understand like cancer is still cancer. Cancer
Yeah.
is still this thing that's kind of unpredictable and super scary. And people die of cancer all the time. And it does not care how old you are,
Right.
you know? And that was my kind of like moment of reflection on how severe certain illnesses really are. Being that
Mhm.
person on the outside, always holding space or sitting with someone going through um, a cancer diagnosis and then, actually passing because of it, there's still a distance there, right? Because you're holding space for them and advocating for them and making sure that their end of life is up to it's up to their wishes and everything that they'd asked for. And so you're still in this space of management. You're kind of still managing a situation, emotions and feelings, and guiding people through it and making sure that they know that their loved ones can come in and talk to them, they can still hear them. So you're still this kind of manager of energy and emotions and holding space in this container at the same time. Where when you're the one being affected by it, it's this is, it's my mom and she has cancer. And now it brings up all these things and mother wounds and triggers, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going, whoa, this is different. So yeah, my heart is with anyone who's having to deal with cancer diagnosis or has a loved one, because now I also have the experience of it by being the person who's actively in it with them.
Right.
uh, so yeah, it's a big deal. And yeah, I think all those things, those very human things we all deal with, we don't talk enough about,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And I think this is one of them. And it's so heartbreaking, you know,
Yeah.
because, and I did a post about this. It's like, no matter how much time you have with someone, you just don't ever feel like you have enough time.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's a really amazing thing when you're sort of able to kind of tune into what your body needs, what your spirit needs in a moment to really shift your behavior. Like you took that space for yourself. And then the world and your community kind of shows you, yes, you did need that space in order to like step into these other roles and kind of
Yeah,
fulfill these community
yeah,
magics, I guess.
I agree.
you
Yeah,
know?
that's exactly what it felt like. Because you're like, because I was saying to myself, oh man, had I been working, I wouldn't have had time for any of this,
Yeah.
or I would have been using it to distract myself from all these things. And now my niece, my baby niece, is my goddaughter, and
Oh,
the connection we have is pretty amazing. It's pretty intense. I don't know if it's going to stay that way forever. I've had these incredible connections with other nieces and nephews, but this one feels really different.
yeah.
And my brother and I were watching a lot of YouTube baby info documentaries, and he was saying something about the, oh my God, is it the, I forget what expands in the brain when you're the primary caretaker. It's
Oh, interesting.
slipping my mind. Is a part of the brain, starts with an A. Oh my gosh, I can't believe can't remember the name. Um, but the primary caretaker, that part of the brain tends to expand. And
Mhm.
so you become more like receptive and in tune to like the baby's needs, their different cries. And because he was the one who became the primary caretaker because his wife was, obviously going through what she was going through. He and I were always joking about that mine expanded as well,
Yeah.
because I was in it with him, and I was like, is that what this is? This like kind of connection that I have to this like
Hmm.
little baby. And but there are moments where I was practicing like hands-on healing with her intuitively, not really thinking anything of it, and just seeing the preciousness of this like life, this like being who's communicating with me without using words. Uh,
Right.
and I've had that experience with animals, obviously, but with little babies who are just like a month or two old, I'm just like, this is so crazy. This is amazing, but it's so crazy. And especially because I'm not the one who's like had her, I'm not like the
Hmm.
parent. I'm a part of the community, but I'm getting the effects of what I'm assuming parents get. And I'm just going, this is what y'all feel? Probably like times 10. But it was really fascinating to like be a part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful to think about. I don't know. I think in queer communities, this is more common to talk about like your family who parents, co-parents. And
Mhm.
um it's amazing to like think about different models of caring for each other, just even in that sort of like nuclear sense.
Yeah.
Um, and the magic that can kind of come forward when you allow your intuition to guide you. Um,
Absolutely. And then, uh, I mean, testament to like, I'm not a parent, I don't have children. And yet I could step in and like feel as if I have this guardianship, this
mhm.
protective uh, role for this little being that, I mean, is not mine, biologically speaking.
Yeah.
We do have blood ties, obviously, because it's my brother's baby, but
Mhm.
yeah, that speaks hugely to um, being held by your community in that way and how we used to be, right? And I
Right.
think I see this a lot on TikTok where people are deciding not to have children. They're like, I am a female presenting, womb carrying individual, and I am choosing not to have children, but I will be the best aunt possible. Like
Right.
I will be that babysitter you can always call on or whatever. And I think that's incredible because that's
Yeah.
I think what we've been missing for a long time. And honestly, I don't know how anybody does it on their own
No.
because my brother and his wife were surrounded by like family and friends, and people were dropping off food and care packages. And then it was like at least 20 people just like coming and going and doing all the things, including me. And I'm like, how do people ever do this by themselves? And like, I, no one should. No one
No
should
one
ever do
should.
this stuff by themselves. And luckily, I'm also, because being a doula, I know a lot of postpartum doulas. I know a lot of baby doulas. I know birth doulas. And I even have a friend who's a retired nurse practitioner, a pediatric nurse practitioner. And I was like, hey, what is going on? So I was able to also lean on my own
Right.
network and support system to like help benefit this community. So it's like, how, I don't know. I don't know how people have done it by themselves. It just seems very, um, I mean, it seems so hard and
Yeah.
isolating and lonely.
Yeah. And I think, especially in this country, so-called United States, we're really going to need to rethink systems of care as we like really struggle with body sovereignty and um, supporting people through their own trauma with their birthing experience and all of that.
Yeah,
Um, so it's going to be interesting. I'm very hopeful for this call to kind of be better neighbors to each other and kind
yeah,
of create like different systems of care. Yeah.
yeah. I think that's really that shift that's needed for
Yeah.
us to not be so afraid of one another anymore and go back to
Mhm.
like that community care and support.
Yeah. I'm curious if you have a sort of practice or ritual you'd like to share with our audience, maybe for this time of year, or maybe just something that has been really supportive to you during this time.
This time of year, altars,
Yes.
altars for loved ones. And I know Samhain's around the corner. And so altars are a huge part of that too. But I like, at least for this rest of the year, doing temporary altars that live for at least 3 months,
Mhm.
where you can do a Samhain altar, for that time. And then you can also do a Day of the Dead altar for that time. But I like just having altars for living and for living family members, but also for family members that have passed on, pets, uh, adding remembrance candles for friends and family who have had loved ones pass on is also
Mhm.
something I like doing at this time of year, just kind of a time of reflection and stillness. So that would be the practice. I have all sorts of rituals. I have all sorts of things I do to go into ceremony. One thing I do want to leave with uh, your audience is, because I get this a lot, where during the pandemic, when we lost loved ones, we weren't able to see them, there is that open ended, I didn't get to say goodbye. And I
Mhm.
just want to acknowledge and validate that most of us can connect to that moment in time and say our goodbyes by recreating it magically or subconsciously in our mind. So memories and kind of iterations, like created iterations, it's very difficult to tell the difference in your own mind. So you can do is you can recreate what you would think their end of life looked like. So if they died in a hospital room, or if they died in their own bedroom in their own home or something like that, you can recreate it in your mind to establish this like new memory where you are saying goodbye to them, where you are there
Mhm.
for them, where you are present and are able to say all the things you wanted to say to them. This goes for pets too, because a lot of the time when we have to euthanize our pets or for children, our beloved animal kin, they take them to the back and they do that without you there sometimes. So this is another way of practicing being able to hold them and say goodbye to them in your own way. Yeah, that's just during this time of year, I tend to really kind of share that and acknowledge that you can create a new memory of you with them saying goodbye.
That's so powerful. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Is there anything you have kind of on the horizon or ways people can connect with you? I know you're in your rest period, so honoring if you don't. I've done some interviews where I'm like, I'm not doing anything. So
Yeah, I mean, I want to do all the things. I have so many ideas and things that I had in the works from last year that are like, hey, we're still here. Um, so I don't. I became a master coach last year, so I am certified as a life coach, as an intuitive body coach, and I want to get back into that. I do want to start my coaching program hopefully next year, but right now I don't know. I do want to get back into dancing as magic.
yeah.
That's another curandera. You can be another type of curandera. It's pretty much inspiring others to move and heal through your own movement, like what we would think as entertainers are. So
Beautiful.
I do miss that practice, that ritual of mine, which was like dance your feelings out, dance to access your feelings. So, but no, right now I don't really have much out there.
I will say, however, your Instagram is like a real just inspiration and such a joy to like interact with your energy there. So
Thanks.
we'll definitely link that here, and everyone should go follow Jessica and enjoy all the content you're creating.
Yeah, and on TikTok, I'm a little moodier. So
Awesome.
TikTok's like I used TikTok to help heal a lot of last year because I went through just a really hard time last year. I'd gotten COVID in the beginning of the year. It was like long haul COVID. I had all sorts of stuff come up. And I used TikTok as like a form of like healing medicine.
Cool.
And yeah, I was like, this is a beautiful way to use this app because I mean, who else can you just like bother 6, 7 times a day? With your like random feelings, you're really sad and like dark and deep feelings. And like the TikTok community was all about it. They're like, yeah, me too. I'm sad too. I'm having depression right now and grief. And so if you want to see me on the moodier side, TikTok's definitely the place. But
Awesome.
Instagram is like my nurtured community where we like engage with one another and like chat. And I love that space too.
Yeah, it's so much. I feel like, you know, we got to remember that that's also like such a generous offering,
Yeah, that's
rather
true.
than just.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think because I get so much benefit from being able to show up as myself that I'm like, well, I mean, I'm digging this. So
Yeah.
I forget that it's a beautiful way to like connect or have people relate and go like, hey, thank you so much, because that's exactly what I'm feeling. I'm feeling alone. I also realized that being on social media is a way for people to feel not alone,
Yeah.
to actually have someone that can relate to them and understand what they're going through. And that goes a lot with the like the suicide and the death ideation. That it's a really big right now. It's skyrocketing. Numbers are skyrocketing, and hotlines are busy, and people can't get through. And if I can like just have a few reels or TikToks where people can just like look at and be like, okay, give them at least some understanding or acknowledgement.
Yeah. So important.
Yeah,
We'll share some of those resources too with this episode.
awesome. Love
Yeah.
that.
Oh, this was such a great conversation. I'm super inspired, and you've taught me so much. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm always loving everything you're doing. Like I'm just always so it's weird. Because we're not that close. And I'm like, I'm just so proud of Casey.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, because it's like really putting yourself out there, but in such a it's not just confident, it's just authentic. It's like this is it. This is who
Oh,
I
thank
am and
you.
this is who we are. And we need a place to be able to like figure ourselves out and find other like-minded individuals. And you know um it's so beautiful that I keep saying the word beautiful, that's just the word of the day is beautiful. Is that the witch community was the first to embrace me, although like I showed up as just a death worker first. Like I was like, I'm just a death doula. And then like the witch community is like, bitch, yeah, right.
You're a witch too.
And you're not hiding from us. And I worked through a lot of like my persecution wounding through
Mm,
that. by being so just like held, and everybody was so responsive. The witch community's like, don't worry, we got your back. Like, show up. Yeah, death is a huge part of our work. So,
Totally.
and I was like, I found my people.
Yes, totally. Well, I feel such a kinship with you as well. And I'm just like so appreciative that we can stay connected and yeah, share your magic. Death is such important medicine in witchcraft and in life. So let's keep talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. And everyone who's enjoyed this, be well.